So payroll and human resources is a lot to talk about in 30 minutes. The concept started as top 10 things and it just ballooned from there. So it's kind of a joke. There's way more than 10 and I won't get through them all. But again, you'll have this slide deck to go over at your own leisure another time. So first of all, what does payroll and HR look like at your school? That's kind of what my opening question was. If you're lucky, you have someone who's dedicated to HR. They may also be the person doing payroll, which is how it works at my school. We have a finance associate who I have trained in the past year to help me enter payroll, so I'm not the only one doing it, which is great. And I have a part-time assistant who's helping in the HR function. But it didn't start out that way. I was party of one and had to do it all by myself. So I'm lucky that we've grown the scope quite a bit, which is helpful. But depending on the makeup of your business office, you may or may not have support and you may be doing these functions yourself. So other people have said, use your network, use your lifeline. There are a plethora of folks out there doing this work. So do not reinvent the wheel, reach out to people and ask them and they will share. So payroll and HR many times are blended or overlap each other, especially when you get to maternity leaves and pay scale and salaries, they sometimes blend. So, just how does each area contribute within your department? And specifically when you're talking about the bottom line, who's in charge of which budget line items, and what are each of the players doing? So if you have an HR generalist, that person most likely is also in charge of recruiting, talent management, culture, compliance, legal practices, training, time and attendance, PTO, employee relations. They're handling all these things. So just keep that in mind. They're trying to do as much as you are in their day. Okay, so let's move on. Oops, I went too fast, sorry. Okay, so in terms of payroll in your CFO position, and Cheryl is our new CFO. So Cheryl's on the call. She's one of the participants this week, and she's been with us for about 6 or 8 weeks. So some of these bullet points she's familiar with because we were talking about them and have gone over them in her new role at our school. So the budget for salaries, how are salaries determined? Does your school have a pay scale? Are there salary bands? How do you determine, who's an FTE or who's exempt, non-exempt? Are folks all salaried or are some hourly? And, there's also a question around W-2s. So I've spoken with schools where their substitute teachers are paid as if they're independent contractors when they should be W-2. So wanting to make sure your folks are classified correctly in terms of how they're being paid, but also how they're classified for exempt, non-exempt, and tracking their hours so that you can pay overtime correctly. We've talked about contracts versus letters of employment. At many schools, the teachers are 10-month employees paid over 12 months. So their annual salary is divided. So for us, we pay semi-monthly, so twice a month. Annual salary is divided by 24. So just kind of know your pay cycle and know why it might fluctuate throughout the year. So over Christmas break, I have to run basically 2 payrolls at once. So then our substitute teachers don't get paid for their December hours until mid-January when we've come back. So just those ebbs and flows throughout the school year that your person who's doing payroll, just ask them. If you see something that you're supposed to be approving and you're not sure why does it look like this, just ask, they'll know. And then how to run payroll reports, that's going to be very important for your role. And just in terms of your school's affiliation, so are you nonprofit? Are you tax exempt? Are you paying into unemployment? Are you affiliated with a church? Just some of those questions need to be asked pretty upfront in your new role so that you know what's applicable to your school. Okay. Okay, we talked about teacher pay versus admin pay and the schedule. So at our school, admin are 12-month employees. So they're working through the summer. And, one other thing you need to know is, how is payroll recorded in your general ledger? And one thing Cheryl brought up was how it flows to the summarized financials that your board of trustees needs to see. And you need to know in general, why is payroll where it's at? Why were there exceptions throughout its history? Where have you been in the past, so you can know where you're going forward. So specifically for us this year, we embarked on what we're calling a salary study, and we hired a third-party consulting firm that works with independent schools all over the country around compensation. And so we took a look at tons of market research and market data, which was phenomenal. Public schools, other independent schools, using Dazzle and Index and all the information we could get our hands on, and taking a look at how do we compare. Obviously looking at degree that the teachers have, their years of experience, things that public schools would look at, but then also what's their impact? What are they bringing to the community? How are they contributing to our school and to the students' lives? So yes, market data, looking at public versus independent schools. You may have teachers push back, why aren't I paid more? Or how come my job would pay more at another school, even another independent school? Definitely public schools pay more. So just being aware of salary trends in surrounding areas. In terms of leave policies, this can get a little tricky. So specifically around maternity leave. So how your maternity leave policy works. So for us, we sort of turn people off, we turn their payroll off and then back on. So gearing up to the maternity leave, and then as they come back from maternity leave. But throughout all that, there's also FMLA, there's their short-term disability policy. There's a lot of things that can overlap, and forms and paperwork that goes with that. So you want to make sure you understand how that process works with whoever in your office is handling this. And then stipends, I don't even know if I want to go there. It can be a headache. Sometimes they're included in annual base salary, sometimes they're not. Sometimes there's a legitimate reason for them, and sometimes there's not. So depending on how your school works, you just want to dig into those stipends and maybe have a discussion around what can be blended or wrapped up into somebody's base salary, and what can really go away or be reassigned. My clicker is very slow. Okay, so this is a scenario. Top performing teacher has come to you asking for a raise. What do you do? So feel free to unmute yourself and you can answer. So A, give it to him or her. The students and parents love them. B, tell them no, it's not in the budget. C, research the market data for comparables. Or D, tell them to go talk to HR.
Probably start with C and end up with B.
I
think it depends on I think it depends on how, because I mean, I've done this before as a teacher, how you present the question. The first time I did it, I said, it was my first year. I'm 24 years old, master's degree. I was like, I want to be paid like Fulton County. My head of school laughed at me, basically. And he did some numbers and gave me like a $200 raise. And he's like, is this good? And I was like, of course. Then I started keeping like a props folder, and for like parent feedback and things like that. And I got more involved in school, and I presented, a package to him that showed him in words my worth. But yeah, I would, if it's if parents, if the teacher's having a tremendous impact, positive impact, then I think it's a good thing, because you want to value that, and you want to make that employee feel valued so that they don't hunt for another job.
Yeah, there's a dance there. It's a fine balance. We've had teachers who we basically told them be, and they did leave and went and found another job. We've probably done all of these, right? There's no right or wrong answer on this list. It depends on the situation. It depends on your budget year. It depends on if it's a hard to fill position. It depends on that individual's work ethic, attitude, performance. Or if you're super just, nope, here's our scale, and you have a master's in 3 years and this is where you fit, then that's where it is. And then it's communicated, it's transparent, and you really can't argue with it. So wherever your school is at, find out what the approach is, or be a part of those conversations so that you know ahead of time. This will happen. It's just a matter of when. So talk to the people on your team and your head of school, obviously. What is their approach, or what has been their approach in the past? And, how are you going to insert yourself into that process? Because it really depends on the situation and on what the school budget is. Usually the person might start with me, and then I go to our CFO plus the head of school, and we have some sort of dialogue and conversation. Sometimes we can meet their needs and sometimes we can't. But it's always
Stephanie,
fun.
Isn't that where the sneaky little stipends come in?
Well, that too. And we've had those
overlapping.
Yeah, no. And it's, okay, could you be a chair of the math department next year, and we'll give you a $1,500 stipend, or what do you want to take on that we can bump up a little bit? And there is room for conversation. And then sometimes you're kind of already at the ceiling, and you really can't do more. And so there have been times where it worked, that there was a separation, and then there was times we really needed to fight for that person to stay.
Stephanie, don't you think, in my experience, our heads can be quite creative when it comes to questions like that? But I think at the end of the day, I would caution making sure you can back whatever your decision is, because if one comes to you, many will come. They talk.
Oh, they do. And that's why for 5 years, we've always said no. And usually the conversation is ended there. But we are now at least having dialogue, and with all this market research we've done that can say, this is where you're at and why. These are the comparables. This is the pay scale for our school. Here's where it's going. Here's what you can do to get to the next level in your career. I could talk about this all day. It opens up a whole huge range of your compensation philosophy and the board, the board of directors and their direction and how they want to move the school. And I find it fascinating. I kind of geek out on all the numbers and the conversations around working with these consultants we have from Chicago. But if you want to have a longer conversation about it, I'm happy to. We did an RFP and all of that. It's been my life for like 12 months. So
do you guys find that, because our school switched this year to Cobb County pay scale, last year's Cobb County pay scale, and there were a lot of people who are going to get a raise over 3 years, and anybody that was already paid above that scale, they're frozen until it gets up to there. And so there's no more debate. And our head of school noticed, we had new head of school this year, that men were paid significantly better than women. And I know that, like, I encouraged all of my colleagues in 7th and 8th grade, to women and men both, to, it's okay, guys, you can go negotiate your salary if you're putting in extra effort. And that was, years and years ago, but the females wouldn't do it. And that's a very sticky subject coming from a male, but it's something that when our new head of school came on, it was, you know, she looked at everybody's salaries. It was easy to notice, you know, and that's potentially the difference. Do you guys have that experience as well?
Absolutely. You want to dig into the data. So whoever has the data, go talk to that person. Whether it's in an HRIS system or a big, huge spreadsheet, to look at, you know, the employees, what is their role, how long have they been there, what was their previous experience, and what's their degree level. And then you can start to see, you know, trends, patterns, where might there be outliers, right? You were talking about the gender gap. That's a great place to start, to just dig into the data, see where you're at. For a few years before we hired this consulting firm, we were just tweaking where we saw there needed to be adjustments. Now we really have the market data to back it up and say, this person's already on the high end, we're kind of going to slow their rate down, whereas somebody else is really under where they need to be, let's bump them. So even in COVID-19, where we're kind of pulling back on some of the raises we initially thought were going to happen for next school year, the ones who needed an adjustment because of the salary study we did, we're still giving those people a bump, whereas some others are going to stay flat, quite honestly, because of budget and enrollment numbers. So again, I'm happy to dig into this more with you. It's a huge, you know, somebody mentioned yesterday, it's 60-70% of your budget. So salaries and, you know, just compensation and your benefits, it's your biggest expense. So making sure payroll's correct, making sure you understand why the salaries are what they are, and saving as much money as you can on insurance and benefits. That's how you can impact the bottom line. Otherwise, it is so expensive. So I could go on. But just a few highlights for HR. So finding the right candidate in terms of where you post, there's a lot of free places where you can post, and I can get you a list. Ms. Bo's one of them. And just what is your onboarding process? And talk with your folks so you understand what that is. And then what's the separation process? You want to be careful with your termination procedures. You want to make sure things are documented. You want to make sure you've got, as Jennifer mentioned, legal counsel reviewing your employee handbook and what your policies and procedures are on an annual basis. We do that every summer with our employment lawyers. So sit down with your HR person, just make sure you know what's happening on this front and how they manage the process and where you need to be a part of that process. Specifically, read the employee handbook in detail, write questions, take notes, get in front of a legal counsel, make sure that that document doesn't have anything in it you're not willing to uphold, and then take out stuff that's not applicable anymore and add stuff that's new. Maybe state or federal law has changed and it's not in there. So make sure you're taking a look at that document pretty regularly. And it can be shared electronically, as Jennifer was mentioning. Okay. How are we doing on time? Okay, trying to get through this quickly. As a new CFO, you want to know what your risk areas are. Again, HR is helping with this process. Records management. I think I skipped a slide. We'll go back to that one. Okay. Additional compensation strategies. That's where you're talking about, Deborah. You know, like how else can we show appreciation for our folks? What other ways can we honor them or appreciate them? What besides just their base salary, right? It's your 403B. What are you matching? It's, you know, all the different benefits that you're able to provide, and it's communicating those, right? So they see the number that ends up in their bank account. They don't see all the money that you're spending for them to have medical, dental, vision, telehealth, lunch, before and after care for their kids if your school pays for that. Just all the different benefits, the life insurance, the disability. The school is spending so much above and beyond the base salary. Make sure you're communicating that so that they know what their total compensation is and they're appreciating everything that you're doing for them, because they will complain about their paycheck no matter what you try to do. You need to have a general understanding of broad HR categories. If you are the only person who's doing HR, I recommend that you join the MSBO HR listserv. I recommend you also, Culture Meets Compliance. This is a great book. It has checklists and sample forms, and it's just a really good resource. There's online, there's webinars, there's courses, there's HR certification, there's SHRM you can become a member of. There's a lot of, even your brokers will generally have an HR person that they can put you in touch with when you have questions. And then how your school culture affects HR procedures and policies. So this gets interesting because, you know, it's, as HR, we kind of live in the gray sometimes. You've got your policies and you've got your school culture, you have your leadership and you have your employees. And we're swimming somewhere in the middle. We're supporting the employees, but also representing leadership. And we need to do it in a way that's consistent and compliant, but also cognizant of your school culture. And folks are generally, what did Julie say the first day? A filter of empathy, and you know, they're walking around with their heart. So you need to sometimes hold their hand and walk them through things, and just keep in mind, what is the school culture when you're trying to implement policy? I know I'm talking fast here. Okay. Okay, benefit strategy. I mean, that's a whole nother 30-minute topic, but find out what it is and who's working on it and get into the middle of it. You need to be a part of those conversations. We talk about the employee handbook, exempt versus non-exempt. Make sure your classifications are correct. Consult your legal counsel if you're not sure. Get your job descriptions up to date. And what's the process for HR claims, and when does the CFO come involved? So what is your school's process? If something happens, who are they going to? You need to know what that cycle is. And then retirement plans. So you might be a fiduciary for your school's retirement plan. So you need to know what are your responsibilities in that nature. At our school, it's the head of school, myself, and Cheryl, our CFO. We are the retirement plan committee. We have an ERISA lawyer. We have a third-party financial consulting firm. And then Cheryl reports up to our investment committee on the board of trustees. So know where you fall within that cycle. I'm trying to go through this quickly. Okay, we're not gonna have time for questions or more scenarios. Okay. Okay, so other thoughts, we've talked about this already. You've heard people say this, relationships matter. You wanna be approachable. You want to be somebody people can go to, and you want to know people. Make sure you know people's names, and it makes a difference. So use data to make decisions whenever you can. Again, when we're talking about salary structure, how do people compare internally? It might depend on different degrees and levels of experience, but accept that, you know, things will not always be black and white. So as the bean counters, as the CPAs, as the person who's in charge of the money, sometimes the answer is not in a policy handbook, and you have to figure it out situation by situation. And just be open to that, and just know that the answer's in the room. Have your HR person in the room, have the conversations, and you're going to work through it situation by situation, and then document what you do so that you do have a precedent and you can go back to that going forward. So I guess as we wrap up, just think about in what areas you need more understanding, who in your office do you need to sit down with and say, okay, you handle HR, you handle payroll. What do I need to know? What do I not know? Or what do I not know that I don't know? And that I need to be aware of? What are the pain points? Where do you need me to get involved? How do you need me to support you? Really quick, COVID-19 return to work considerations. We just reopened on Monday, live on campus for our administrators. So I have sample policies and procedures I can share with you, but do involve your legal counsel. Things to think about, are you going to be requiring people to test and take temperature, and you want to train everyone? We reopened our infant program May 11th. We reopened summer camps on June 1st. And again, we brought back our administrators June 15th. So we've got, procedures and policies to share if you'd like to see them, and just be cognizant of how you're communicating and then your employees' morale. They really need support right now. They're coming back or will be coming back in the fall. And there's just a huge focus on mental health as well as physical well-being. So be thinking about that. If you do not have somebody like an HR person or a counselor or a chaplain, if you don't have somebody that they can go to and talk to, assign that and make sure somebody is looking out for people's mental health and well-being. It's going to be huge as we, re-enter the workforce and bring back the school year. So I'm going to stop, see if you have any questions. I know I went through that really quickly. Diane said I had till 3:40, so I was trying to get through a lot of information very fast.